Hey, hi everyone. Hello, hi everyone. Perfect. I can see people are joining. Let's wait few more minutes for rest of the people to join. Okay. So I can see there are 4, 5 people in the class right now. So let's wait for rest of the students to join as well, and accordingly we are going to start. So come on, put something in the chat. Who is here and who is not? Come on, guys. So how is everyone doing? Hello, guys. Hi everyone. Hey, Sukhdeep. Hi, Jashmeet. Hi everyone. Hello. Perfect. So we'll be starting in 2 minutes only. Okay, so we will start exactly after 2 minutes. And if you remember, until now we have taken two classes of this entire course, JavaScript basics. Okay, and we have completed first of all variables. We have completed until now what data types are. We have completed what operators are, and then finally we completed in our previous class conditionals as well. Okay, and then I also gave you kind of overview of what loops are. So in today's class is going to be the very important class. Okay, and you have to remember one very important thing. Today's class is going to be the base of everything that you are going to learn in JavaScript. At least 50 to 60% of what you are going to learn in JavaScript. Today's class is the base for that. Okay, I'm not talking about loops. I am talking about actually functions. Okay. So in today's class, we'll be discussing about functions as well. So I can see there are 10, 12 people who have joined the class. Please put a hi in the chat so that I can understand who has joined the class or not. Okay. So I hope everyone is doing great. Everyone is doing wonderful. Hey, hello, guys. Hi. Perfect. So is my screen visible, guys? I hope my screen is visible, right? So I have shared my screen. Please do let me know in the chat that my screen is visible or not. Okay. Yes, my screen is visible. Perfect. Great. So now let's start our today's class. What we discussed in our previous class was we discussed about conditionals, right? In today's class, what we'll be doing is we'll be discussing about loops. This is also one of the basic constructs of programming. Does not matter what type of programming language we talk, but it is actually common in every programming language. Whether you talk about C, whether you talk about C++, whether you talk about JavaScript or any other programming language, you will always find a very basic construct of programming, which is loops. That's what we are currently discussing, right? What do you mean by loop? There are a lot of times in our programming, whenever we try to do any task over there, or we are trying to complete a task inside our programming, we always write our instructions, right? And there's a huge possibility that sometimes what we would want is we would want to execute same type of instructions a lot of times. Means we will try to repeat maybe these instructions, yes or no? So what are we trying to do? We are trying to repeat the instructions maybe, right? So, in order to understand that, we need loops. So, whenever we talk about loops over there inside our JavaScript, we have three types of loops. How many loops? Three types of loops. Number one over there is called for loop. Number two is called a while loop, and number three is called a do while loop. That's what we are going to discuss in today's class. So, let me create a file which is going to be day3.js, in which I will discuss my loops one by one. The first loop that we talk about inside our JavaScript is for loop. Okay. Now, what is this for loop and how does it work over there? Give me a second. I have lost the connection for my writing pad. Okay. So just give me a second. Perfect. It's back. Okay. So over here, if you see right now that whenever I talk about this particular loop, it has three variables over here. Whenever we talk about any kind of construct inside our programming, it actually always has a proper syntax in anywhere. Okay. So similarly, whenever we talk about for loop, we need to understand it is syntax in order to implement it. So let's do that. Let's go over it. Let's try to understand how this loop works. So let me simply write for. Whenever we use for loop, if you go on the internet as well, you will find a common syntax everywhere, but that is not actually the main syntax of it, but we will discuss that maybe later on. Okay, the first syntax that you will see over here is it actually receives three partitions. Number one is called the initialization. Number two, you put a semicolon in between. Number two is condition. And then number third over here is called updation. What are these three things? We will discuss them in a second. Now remember, these three things are very important. In between of these curly braces, I have told in our previous class, what we do is we write our statements. Those statements that we want this whole particular block to execute. And what do we want? We want these statements to repeat themselves. That's what loop means. But कब तक repeat करेगा? Up to what time? How many times is it is supposed to execute this particular program? We need to understand. For that we have this condition. As long as this condition is true over there, our program will be executed in a loop. These statements will execute themselves in a loop. So let's see an example over here. First of all, initialization. What do we initialize in programming? We have seen that we initialize a variable. Usually whenever we talk about any loop, we make it dependent on a variable. As soon as that variable satisfies a particular condition, until then this particular loop executes itself. Okay, so second thing, if you remember, the syntax is condition. Let's suppose I will tell it as long as my I is 5, and then we need updation. Updation, why do we need updation? Because if you see, right now my I is 0. If I don't tell it to update this I to 1 to 2 to 3 or anything else, this condition will always be true, because 0 will be always less than 5. So we have to make our loops finite. It should not be like we will execute our loops infinite amount of times. So it means whenever we talk about loops, loops will have a condition, but that condition should be finite condition. So let's go over here. Let's simply increment it. We know what I plus plus is. What is I plus plus? I plus plus simply says that every time this loop executes itself, whatever the current value of I is, it will be incremented by 1. That's what this, it's called an incrementer operator. So let's suppose over here what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply say console.log my name, which is Adfar. Okay, see over here, I am telling it start initialize my I with 0. I is the name of the variable over here. Then I am telling it I should be less than 5. And then finally I am telling it incremented. So how many times will this loop be executed? As long as my I satisfies this condition. Okay, let's try to understand this with our pen. If you see over there what happens, my I starts with 0. I will be very quick over here. Okay, then what will happen? It will check this condition. If this condition returns true, condition always returns a boolean. It will either return true or it will return false over here. If this condition, according to the variable value that I have, it returns true, then this will be executed. So right now 0 is less than 5, so it is going to execute itself, and then our loop ends. But as soon as our loop ends, where it will go? It will go to this updation. Now it will update my I with 1. I becomes 1. So is still I less than 5? Is 1 less than 5? The answer is of course yes, which means it will execute this loop again. It will again go back to updation, again increment my I value with 1. So I will become 2 over here. So on and so forth. As soon as my I reaches 5, now it will check the condition whether 5 is less than 5, which is not true. In that case, it will stop executing it. Which means if you check over here with respect to this program, you will automatically understand adfer will be executed 5 times. Why 5 times? Because my condition satisfies itself only 5 times. So, what is the most important thing to execute a loop over here? You might already guess the answer. It is this condition. As long as this condition is true, it will update this loop. If it is not true, it will simply stop it. What if instead of this adfer, I will simply tell it to display I? Since I is a variable, I can access it inside this particular loop. So if I directly tell it print me what the value of I is, it will execute increment this I with 1 1 1 1. So first initially it is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So you can automatically see I have the output as 0 1 2 3 4. So simply console.log means print the value of I over there according to what the I is. So we have understood that my I will start with 0, execute the loop, increment it, I will be 1, execute the loop, increment it, I will be 2, so on and so forth. Now this is the simple syntax of for loop. We can do a lot of things over here with this particular loop. Okay, for example, right now you can see the output that we got. If I write over there instead of 5, I will write 10. It will execute it 10 times. So you will see in the output it says 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 8 9. Right now it is an incrementer. This code that I am writing over there is an incrementer. Starting with 0 increments itself with 1. What if I have to make a down counter decrementer, which means the initial value of I should be 10, then it should decrement over there the values. It should display 9, then 8, then 7, then 6. So in that case what we will do is we will simply, let me copy this and comment it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply paste the same code, but this time I will initialize it with 10. And now instead of plus plus I can say minus minus as well, because it's an updation. It is not necessary I will have only incrementer over there. No, I can put whatever I want. I can put I plus equals to 2 as well. I can put I minus equals to 2 as well. I can put any arithmetic operation, but this entirely, the only purpose over here of this particular updation is to make my condition finite, which means it should somehow affect my condition so that after some executions my loop will properly terminate itself. If it does not terminate, it is going to execute itself infinite amount of time, which is a problem. Okay, so now let me go back, let me write I minus minus. But right now I am telling it I should be less than 10. What if I will simply tell it over there I should be less than 11? You will see I first it will be 10, then 9, then 8, then 7, then 6, then 5, 4, 3, 2, so on and so forth. Which means the condition will always be true. No matter what, this updation is not making it finite. So in this case, if I execute it, you will see infinite loop. It is not stopping. It's going down, down, down. It will display all the values and it will never stop. So you have to stop it deliberately. So our loops entirely depend on this condition. So in order to make this loop finite, we have to write our condition in a way so that it will terminate itself according to the updation value some place. So I will tell it I should be greater or equal to 0. Now if I execute it, you will see down decrementer. So 10, 9, 8, 7. Up till this I is greater or equal to 0, it will work. After that, it will terminate itself. So this is first basic loop. I'm not going to waste too much time over here. Let's move forward. There is one another type of loop inside our JavaScript, which is called over there while loop. You will also find this in C. You will also find this in other programming languages as well. Okay, what is this while? While is another keyword, or you can say a predefined function inside a predefined loop inside our JavaScript, with which we can execute loop. We can execute same instructions in a repeated mode until a condition is met inside our programming. What is the syntax? We directly write while, then we put these brackets, and then we simply write curly braces. If you remember, in for loop we had three things: initialization, condition, updation. But if we talk about while loop, we have only one thing, that is nothing but a condition over here. If this condition is a true, this is expression. If it returns true, it will execute these statements. If it returns false, it will not execute these statements. So as long as this condition is true, these statements that I'm writing inside this block will be executed again and again, the logic that I have. So let me directly go over here and let me try to write something over here. Dekho, I will write a while loop. Okay, in this, I simply need a condition, yes or no. Let's suppose the condition is my number should be less than 10. If I write I should be less than 10. But the problem over here that you might see is that is I defined? Is I anywhere defined? No, I is nowhere defined. I have not defined over here until now I. मैंने सब कुछ comment किया है. Comment means there is nothing now defined, it will not be executed. So if I talk about while loop, it does not have three things inside it, inside its syntax. It has only one. But initialization we must do outside of while as well. So I will define it like this: I should be 0, something like this. We can also define our variables like this. So initialization I am doing outside of while loop. And then what I will do is I will write somehow like this: console.log, let's suppose 10. Not 10, I, sorry. Okay. What will happen? It will simply say I is 0. Is I less than 10? So you can see I is less than 10, which means 0 is less than 10, which means no matter what I do right now, it will always be true. And if it is always true, this loop will never stop itself. So if I execute it over here, you will always see lot of zeros in the output. It will never stop. Why? Because the condition that I have implemented is it is always 0. And what do we do in order to make our condition finite limited? We update the value of that loop on which the loop depends. So in that case, what I will do is I will directly go over here. I will tell inside the loop statement itself, increment my I plus plus, which means as soon as it prints the value, it will update I. So it means it is also somehow similar to for loop, but this time we break those three statements separately and put them one outside of loop, another one inside of while loop. That is thing. There's no other difference, although there's one other difference, but we will understand that maybe later on. Okay. So this is called while loop over there. Now let me comment this as well. Let us discuss our third and last loop type inside our JavaScript, which is called do while loop. Okay. Another very important loop. Please tell me in the chat in the meantime, is everything good until now? If you have any questions, please do let me know. Okay. Now let's try to write that over here, the syntax of do while loop. And there's a proper difference between while and do while. And it's asked in the interviews as well. Okay. Please do let me know. So we write do and then we write curly braces. And whatever statements we are supposed to do, we write that. Whatever statements we want to execute, we write them like this. After this statement's curly brace block is completed, we then write while loop over here. Then we write over their condition. So you can automatically compare your while loop with this particular syntax as well, and you will of course find a proper difference. Right now, I am writing condition later and it is executing the statements first. If you remember our first class, I have told you JavaScript is single threaded synchronous language. Okay, so now let's go over here and let me simply write some logic. Okay, what is that logic? I will simply try to write a do while loop. Let me simply say do, and I will also say, let's suppose console.log, I will say other. Okay, please print my name while what? A condition. Let's suppose I is less than 10. Okay, and I will execute this. Right now, do you see anywhere I have created, defined my I variable? No. So if I execute it over here, it will directly tell you I is not defined. Define it first. So let me go over and let me define my I, which is, let's suppose I is equals to 0. Okay, I is equals to 0. So of course 0 is less than 10, which means this condition is always true. It will execute this infinite loop. You can see that over here. So infinite times my other will be executed again and again. Perfectly fine. But there's a catch. What is the catch? Let me first of all make sure I will add an updation. The updation purpose is only one thing, to make my loop finite, and we would always want a loop inside our program that is finite in nature. So what will I do inside the statements? I will say I plus plus. But you might ask, sir, it looks exactly like while. I am also defining my variable, initializing my variable outside of this loop. I am also incrementing, the updation inside the loop. But why do we write do over here? Right now, if you see, if I close my terminal and execute it again, you will see for only 10 times, because it is properly exactly how while works. But let me make this condition over there false by default. Let's suppose I is 20. Is my 20 less than 10? The answer is no, which means condition is from start false. And I have told you loops get execute only if your condition is true. So in this case, is my condition true? No, it is not. It is false from the beginning. But there's a very small thing that you need to understand inside do while loop. even if my condition is false from the very beginning, it will still execute the statements at least once. So if I execute it, you will automatically see if I execute it, adfer is still at least once there. That is the difference between do while and while. Do while, even being the condition false, it will still execute my statement once. But while, if our condition is false, my loop will not be initiated. So that is the difference. Is it clear? Is it clear? Right? Is it clear? Yes or no in the chat? Perfect. So now let's move a little bit forward. Now let's discuss, as I have told you, the most important topic for today's class. And what is that? That is functions. Okay, that's functions. Now let's try to understand what functions are. Okay, let's try to understand what functions are. And I have also already told you this very important point over there, that whenever I talk about this functions over here, you must understand one small thing, which is functions are most important topic inside our JavaScript. Maybe for C language, maybe for other language over there it might be something else, but at least for JavaScript we know functions are the most important over there. Also, they are called the heart of JavaScript. So if any one of you wants to maybe master the skills of JavaScript, you must understand what functions in JavaScript are, what are the different types of functions in JavaScript. Okay, please and please pay close attention over here. But before we discuss related to JavaScript, let's discuss in common terms. What do you think? What do you mean? And what do you understand when anyone says what functions are? What are functions? If you see, look closely to this program, you can see that whole of this over here right now is the program that we have, which will be executed by the compiler or interpreter, whatever you say inside JavaScript. This is a program, right? But what would you do if you want to create mini programs inside your JavaScript? Like you want to create a bunch of statements, and those bunch of statements should be executed only if you call that program. Right now, if I execute this, everything will be executed on its own. Doesn't matter whether I call it or not. Why? Because it is right now inside the global scope. Okay. But what will you do if you want to write some statements? Maybe you want to create a calculator, maybe, but you want to make sure that if anyone gives two numbers to it, then only it will, it should call the calculator program and give you the arithmetics of it. Which means we need a concept and maybe a container or a box in which we will simply put some instructions, put our code, save it, and then that particular container will be executed only and only if you invoke it, if you call it. And for that we simply use functions. Let's understand very basics of functions as of now. How do we define function? We write function keyword, then we write the function name. Function name can be anything. Like we define our variables, we write a, b, c, name, whatever name, right? Similarly, this function name can be anything. Then we put a bracket over there, and then we write our curly brace. Okay, curly brace. This is the function. We write our statements inside these curly braces. Now we need to understand what actually it does, how it is executed. Let's see an example over here. So let me create a file. It is going to be functions .js, let's suppose, in which I will simply create a function like this. Okay, let me name it. It says hello. The name of the function is hello. Okay, and I will execute it like this, like this, like this. And what it will do is, let's suppose it simply says console.log adfer. Okay, after this function, I will also write console.log LaMiCons. If I execute it, you can see there are 4 lines of code. Function hello, inside that hello, I am telling you to print adfer. Then on line number 4, there is LaMiCons. It says print LaMiCons. So if I right now execute it over here, you will only see LaMiCons. Do you see anything else in the output? No, there's not adfer. Which means I have created a section inside my programming, which is a mini program, but it is not executed on its own. That is what functions are. So functions are a bunch of statements combined together only executed if you call them, if you invoke them. And how do you invoke your functions inside your JavaScript or any other programming language? You call that function by its name. So iska naam yahan pe hello hai. So if I invoke my function like this, you will automatically see in the output over there, now I have adfer as well. Why do I have adfer with LaMiCons? Because I have told it to call that mini program over here. So that's what functions are. Simple, nothing else. So this is a definition of function. It's a container which we create only for one purpose, so that we can join, bunch of instructions over there, and those instructions will be executed only if we invoke them. Very good. Let's move a little bit forward. The syntax that I have wrote over here for functions, it is very much incomplete. Very much incomplete. Why? Because whenever we talk about these functions, you might have observed in front of function name, I have pasted a bracket, parenthesis. In these parentheses, what we have is it receives parameters. Those parameters that we can pass to this particular function on which it might perform some operations. For example, parameter 1, comma parameter 2, comma parameter 3 depends on how many parameters you want to use. It's not necessary you will write par1. You can write any name or any identifier. Either X, Y, Z, A, B, C, number 1, number 2, number 3 depends on your requirements. Let's go over here. Let's see the same example now, okay? And this type of function, when you write your function in this particular syntax, you use a proper function keyword, then you write a function name, in bracket you put parameters. This type of function in JavaScript is called a function statement. I'm stating a function over there. Okay, let's go over here. Let me simply copy this and comment it quickly, and let me paste it over here. Okay, right now I will simply say x comma y. X comma y are the parameters name. Whatever you want to name them, it's completely up to you. You want to name them adfer and LaMiCons, do that. Since they are parameters, which means I am kind of telling this that this function contains something. This box has some kind of variables, although we call them parameters, not variables over there. So in this case, let me remove this adfer. What I will do is I will tell it to console.log x comma y. Simple, x comma y. The parameters that I am defining while declaring that particular function, I am also telling them to print it. If I write now executed, you will automatically see in the output it says undefined, undefined. Why? Because we have not told it what the value of x is that you are going to pass to the function, what the value of y is that you are going to pass to the function. And how do we pass them? Whenever you invoke that function, whenever you call that function, whatever the order of these parameters is, you have to pass them over here by giving them value. So if I say 4 comma 5, right? So 4 will be simply given to x, 5 will be simply given to y. So you can automatically see now if I execute it in the output, it says LaMiCons 4 and 5. So can I say x is 4, y is 5? Yes. Now if I say instead of x comma y, I will say x plus y. If I write now executed, you will automatically see it says 9. Why? Because I am passing 4 and 5, which means now I am able to do lot of work, and it actually helps me, makes my process very easy with this particular parameters. Now there's a very important interview question, and I would like to answer, I would like to see an answer in the chat by any student over here. These are called parameters and these are called arguments. What's the difference between parameters and arguments? Remember, whenever we define a function inside our JavaScript, whatever variables we pass over there while defining that function, they are called parameters. But when that function is invoked, means called over there, whatever values we pass them, they are called arguments over there. So they are completely, although not different over there, but they are two terms, parameters and arguments over there. Very good. Let's see one another thing. Usually आप सबने देखा होगा in any programming language, whether we talk about C, Java, Python, or any other programming language, you might have seen whenever you define any function, you actually see one another thing which is called return. You see a return over there. what does this return mean? In front of this return, you can put whatever you want. You can put whatever you want. It's completely up to you. Let's suppose I will simply tell it to return adfar. Okay, return adfar. My JavaScript, I have told you in our previous class, I have told you that JavaScript is dynamically typed language. We don't have to specifically tell it what the data type it has to return. No, it will automatically understand that this particular program returns a string and something else or an object, whatever. So if I right now execute this particular code, you will see that it only displays 9. But does it display over there adfar? No, it does not display adfar, which means you need to understand what return is. Okay, what return is. Whenever we talk about functions, there are two things. There are two things related to functions. What are those two things exactly? Number one is that you define that function, then you invoke them. And it is not necessary that you will invoke them after 2 lines, after 3 lines, after 4 lines. No, you can invoke them whenever you want, wherever you want. There's a huge possibility I might invoke this function again. So instead of 4, I will this time say 14 and I will this time say 15. So of course, it's going to execute the same logic for this particular invocation as well. So if I execute it, you will see 9 and 29. Of course. So you can call it 100 times, 10,000 times, how many times you want, you can do that. So if you execute this particular code right now, all of them are going to display a different output over here, which you probably already know. Very good. After that, if I look over here, I have told you there are two things. First is define the function itself. Another one over there is invoking that particular function. When you define a function over there, it's not necessary that I will write directly only return. I can write hundreds of statements inside, hundreds and thousands. Those hundreds and thousand statements directly will be executed and they will be displayed inside the invoke. बट जहां पे वो इन्वोक हो रहा है ना, where that particular function is invoked, over here to that particular position, that particular return will be given to. It won't be printed on its own, no, unless and until you tell it at that point print whatever that function returns. So if I right now go over here, if I tell it instead of this particular hello directly invoked, I will simply say console.log, but console whatever my hello function is returning as well. Let's suppose 23, 24. If I right now execute it, you will automatically see that adfer right now in the output as well. Why? Because I have told it whatever that function is returning to this invocation, print that as well. So you can see console.log. You might remember that whenever we define functions inside C or some other programming language, we write, let's suppose, a basic function, void main, curly braces, and then we close it. Void main. What does void say? Void means that this time it is not necessary my function will return anything to its invocation. But if I write int main, it means simply this function is supposed to return an integer. But यहाँ पे in JavaScript, whatever you return, it is going to return directly that. You don't have to specifically tell it to return void, to return int, to return float. It is automatically going to print whatever it returns over there. Perfectly fine. This is about basics of functions over here. Let's move a little bit forward. Now let's talk about one very important thing in functions, which is called different types of functions. Different types of functions. The number one type of function that we have, there are a lot of types. For example, first of all, function statement, which we have seen already. Function statement. Second thing over here is called a function expression, which we will see in a second. Okay. Third thing over here is called a function callback function, actually, not function, but callback function. So let me put over there, or let's say fat arrow function is third, because this is the order I am going to teach you in. Fat arrow functions. Fourth thing over there is called anonymous functions. There are a lot of variety of functions inside our JavaScript. So you might note it down as well if you are making notes. Fifth one over there is called callback functions. Very important type of functions as well. Sixth is called over there higher order functions. So whenever we talk about functions in JavaScript, there's not just one type of function. No, 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 no. There are six, seven types of functions which we have to understand. Whatever we discussed until now, it automatically comes in function statement. Now let's go over here. And now let's try to understand one another very important type of function, which is called a function expression. Let me comment it quickly, okay? Perfectly fine. Let's go over here. Let's now try to discuss what function declaration is. Sorry, what function expression is. You might have observed, if you already know programming, okay, this statement is for all those people. If you already know what programming is, you might already know that whenever we define functions in a lot of programming languages, can we store a function in a variable? Yes, maybe or maybe not. But in most of the programming languages, we don't have that luxury. But in JavaScript, there's one of the best things about JavaScript is that it is not necessary that you will directly create function statements like function name, whatever statement it has. No, you can also define a variable, name it whatever you want. So let me name it greet. In front of this, you will simply have a function like this. I am right now storing a function in a variable. Can this be done in other programming languages? Please check that. But it can be done in JavaScript. I can store my functions in a variable over here. Now let me directly put some statement into it. Let's suppose console.log answer. Okay. So if I execute it over here, you will automatically see there's nothing in the output. Why? Because there's a variable, but it is not printed over there. Let me console.log greet over here. Since it's a variable, let's see what is stored inside this variable. If I execute this code over there, you will see it says function, which means it is giving us some output over there. So it is not an invalid syntax in JavaScript whenever we talk about storing a function in a variable. We can do it. Although there is a proper difference between this type of function, which is function statement, and this type of function, which is called function expression or first order functions. This is called function expression over here. Okay. So there's a proper difference which we will discuss most probably in our next discussion, because next discussion is going to be all about call stack and execution context. But let's do that later. Okay. So how do we tell it to display my adfer? Can I invoke this particular function like this? Can I invoke it? Let's see. If I execute it, is there adfer in the output? Of course, yes. Which means it's also a function. And I have told you functions only work if you invoke them. But the difference right now between the previous function and this function is only that this is stored in a variable that was directly defined in, directly over there. And also, can I pass parameters to it? Of course, yes, you can pass parameters. So I can also tell it over there. And it is not necessary I will every time write x comma y. I can write r comma t as well. So now while consoling it, I can also tell it console.log what x into t, not x, sorry, r into t. Of course, it's going to work. So now the only thing is, if I execute it, it will only print adfer over there and nan. Why? Because I have not provided values to this r. What is a nan? Nan. It is a very special thing inside our JavaScript, which is called a not any number. So basically, this particular statement over there gives us an output which is nan, not any number. Hi Saurav, hello, how are you doing? Perfect. In the meantime, I request all of you to please share this video with your friends so that maybe they might learn something new about functions in JavaScript. Okay, let's move forward. So, in order to tell it exactly what the values of R and T is, what do we need to do? We must provide arguments over there. So, I will tell it the first value is 12, which will be automatically mapped to R, comma, the second value is 14, which will be automatically mapped to T. So, if I execute it right now, we will automatically see now it says 168, because that's what the multiplication of 12 and 14 does. But guys, I have a small question right now. I have defined a variable, right? I have defined a variable which is greet. But have I given any name to this function? Have I given any name? Like, for example, if you see over here, I wrote function, then function name, then parameters. Have I given any name to this particular function over there? The answer is no. There's no name that is given in front of this function. whenever we do not give any name to any function, functions without its name, they are called anonymous function. What are they called? Anonymous function. There's other syntax that we use as well, but we will see that maybe later on. Okay, let's move a little bit forward. Okay, now let's discuss something very cool. And it is going to set our base for our next class so that you will be very interested for our next class. I have told you that what we can do is we can also define a function like this. Let me copy this and let me paste it over here. Okay. Although let me uncomment it so that it can execute its code. So now if I simply go over there, write hello over there, I will say 3, 5, you will automatically see in the output there's a proper value over here, which is other for 168 and 8 because 3 and 5 is 8. Very good. Which means I am able to write, create, define functions in two ways, and both of them are doing same thing. Then why do we need these two ways? There is a very huge difference, and it is the best difference over there that is asked in the interviews as well. If you remember our first class, do you remember our first class? I have told you that JavaScript is single-threaded programming language, which means it will execute these lines of code only if its previous lines of code are executed, but not in terms of functions. I'm talking generally over here. This line of code will be executed only if its previous line of code is executed. It's a single threaded programming language. Line by line execution happens over there. We have to understand that. Let's discuss about the first difference. The first difference is already clear. This is stored in a variable. This is not. Let's discuss second variable difference over here. What will happen if I simply say greet, okay, and I will say simply 1, 2. Sorry, not as a string. 1, 2. What am I doing on line number 15? If you see over there, I am defining function later on, but first I am trying to access it. Can I do that? Is it allowed? Is it allowed? What do you think about that? Please type yes or no in the chat. Is this allowed inside our JavaScript? That if we talk about functions, I can access that function even before declaring it. Usually it should not happen because we know execution happens line by line. So if we want to execute this line of code, our logic says, our common sense says that this line of code should be defined before this. Maybe यहाँ पे या इसके ऊपर. तो क्या ये execute होगा? What do you think about that, guys? Do you see? Do you understand? And do you think right now this greet will be executed? The answer to this is, let me comment rest of the code so that we can only see this particular output. If I go in the output, the answer is of course going to be 3. So you can see that. Although there's an error. What is the error? Sorry, it's not greet, it's hello, not greet. Hello. Hello is the name of this function. Okay. So if I execute it over here, you will automatically see there's a 3 output over here, which means something weird is happening over here. And what is that weirdness? That weirdness is I am defining function later, but I am accessing it first. मैं इसको बाद में इसको डिफाइन करता हूं बट एक्सेस पहले करता हूं. ये तो होना नहीं चाहिए ना, बिकॉज जावास्क्रिप्ट सिंपली सेज दैट आई एम synchronous single threaded programming language, but that is not with respect to our what's it called function statement. Although right now it's also doing function a single threaded synchronous execution over there, but why it is able to execute it, we will see that later. Why? Because in our next class we will first have to understand what execution context is, what happens with the JavaScript code when it is executed over there. But मैं यही चीज अब greet के साथ करता हूं. I will go over there and I will uncomment this greet. Okay, this time it is saved inside a variable. If I define it without putting it in a variable, I was able to access it. But now let me define my greet over here and let me pass 1, 4. 1, 4. So you will right now see I am calling this greet function, then I am defining it. In the previous example, it did invoke it. Right now, if I execute it, you will automatically see it says error. Greet is not a function, which means right now there is a proper difference. If I have a function statement, I can access it even without declaring it before. But with function expression over there, I cannot. Function statements हमें allow करता है that I can execute and access my function before declaring it, but function expression does not allow me to do that. Very good. Which means the first difference is this. And this is the concept of hoisting. There's a very important concept in JavaScript, although we will explain it properly in the our next class, because we have to, first of all, in order to understand this topic, we must understand a lot of other things as well. There's a concept in our JavaScript which is called hoisting. Okay, hoisting is nothing but a behavior, we can say, for functions and for variables. Whenever you are able to access your function or variable, whenever you are able to access your function or variable even before declaring it, that particular concept is called hoisting. In that case, right now, I can say functions are supporting hoisting or variables are supporting hoisting. Let's see another example of hoisting over there, quickly related to variables. Okay, let me comment everything over here. Let's go over here. Let's try to understand one thing, which is this. I will define a variable. Let's say var a is equals to 10. If I go over, if I say console.log a, of course, inside a, I have 10. It is executed properly. You can see 10 in the output over here. And since we already know our JavaScript is single threaded synchronous, which means first this will be executed, then only it will execute this, right? तो इसका a के पास वैल्यू इसलिए है because var a 10 properly execute हो गया है. But what will happen if I, instead of accessing this a over here before this, what will happen? Before declaring, I am trying to access the value of a over there. What does that even mean? We need to understand that. Since we already know JavaScript is synchronous, our logic says it should simply say error in the output. It should not know what a is. It should not even tell me. It should not even concern about a, because it does not know a before this particular code. It knows a, but after this particular line of code. But even if I execute it, you will see undefined in the output, which means there's no error, which means there is something a inside memory in front of which there's undefined stored. And this type of concept is also called hoisting over there. Whenever you are able to access anything from variables even before declaring them, that concept inside our JavaScript is called hoisting. Perfect. Let's move a little bit forward. Now let's see the difference, another difference. Instead of where, I will say let now. Okay. And let me cut it out and let me go over and paste it over here. If I execute it properly in the output, it says 10. But what will happen if I try to access the same variable before declaring it? So if I execute it over there, you will see there's an error, which means simple behavior is changing over there only by the declaration of variable. If I use variable, I am getting undefined in the output. If I using let, I am getting error in the output, which means, and it says over there, the error says cannot access a before initialization, which means we need to properly understand there are some things which allow us to access our, which gives us the permission, or which gives us the availability of memory even before declaring it. And whenever that case happens inside our code, it is called a hoisting. I hope we are clear with this particular example as well. And that is the difference between function statement and function expression. So function statements are properly hoisted. You can access function statement even before declaring it, but you cannot access function expression before declaring it. And how, why is that? Why is that behavior? There's a proper reason behind it as well, but of course we will see that in our next class. Sorry. Okay, let's move a little bit forward. If you remember, I told you that there are other types of functions inside our JavaScript. There is function statement which is done, there is function expression which is done, but there is fat arrow functions as well as anonymous function. Anonymous function is already done but partially, but we will consider it done. What is fat arrow function? Let me tell you about that. We all know that whatever has came in this universe related to programming language over there or anything, it of course had its updates. There were newer versions that were introduced to it, right? You can see in your mobile phones there was Android version, then 5.0, then something else, vanilla, right? Now Snapdragon, so on and so forth, which means newer versions come every time. Similarly, in JavaScript, there was a latest version of JavaScript which is called ECMAScript 6. ES6. It is called ECMAScript 6. This was one of the versions of JavaScript. When we talk about this ECMAScript 6, this ECMAScript 6 gave lot of new syntaxes to the JavaScript. which means there were already some syntaxes for functions, maybe for other type of coding concepts. But if we talk about this type of version of JavaScript, it gave us new versions. For example, let and constant, these two keywords were given by ECMAScript 6. Similarly, there's also one type of functions inside our JavaScript which is called fat arrow functions. These fat arrow functions allow our application to write the same functions, but in a better way over there, in a more compact way. We don't have to write the function keyword every time. No, we will simply use this better version of function. It is nothing but a syntactic updation of function. That's what ECMAScript gave us related to fat arrow functions. How does it look? We will, of course, see that in our next class, discuss it. But let me give you exactly what we are going to discuss in our next class. So these are the prerequisites for the next class. Okay. In our next class, our title is going to be Global Execution Context and Call Stack. And I can promise you one thing. If you come in the next class, join our next class, and understand, see that lecture and understand call stack and global execution context, at least you will definitely, for sure, will be good for your interviews related to at least for 3 questions. This portion of JavaScript definitely is asked in the interviews, and this particular concept will give you a quick overview. It will give you a basic understanding actually how JavaScript works whenever you execute that JavaScript code. Simple. How JavaScript works. For example, if you see from starting to now, I have written lot of code. मैंने बहुत कोड लिखा है यहाँ पे. There are only 28 lines of code. Is it executed directly? No. ये directly नहीं execute होता है. ये पहले अपने engine में जाता है. It goes to engine, JavaScript engine. If you remember in our first class, I asked all of you to install Node.js. So Node.js is nothing but an environment that we install inside our laptop so that what we can do is we can execute our JavaScript. Okay. So the same Node.js over there is the engine environment with the help of which we are able to execute our JavaScript outside of browsers over there as well. And the same environment has lot of components. The first component is called parser. Then we have compiler or interpreter. Then we have call stack inside it, and so on and so forth. What this call stack does is that will be the point of discussion in our next class. Very important topic. Very important topic. This call stack related to this, we will have another topic which is called global execution context. Okay, we have another thing which is called function execution context or local execution context. So these are 2 execution contexts there are, and with help of this execution context, actually we get a complete understanding how our JavaScript is properly executed over there. So this is what we will discuss in our next class, probably next week over there. We don't have any class for next few days, but we have next 3 classes of this entire course over there, maybe next week. So guys, there's a request. All of you will receive a free certificate. All of you are going to receive a free JavaScript course completion certificate. Related to that, there is a Google form that is pasted inside the chat, inside the description, sorry, not in the chat, but inside the description. All of you are going to fill that particular Google form, give your proper feedback, and that is how you will get a free certification from LaMiCons related to JavaScript. But filling that form is very important. LaMiCons official handle has also pasted the link of that particular form in the chat section. So please and please submit that, and you will get your free certificate, and also share your valuable feedback. So in today's class, we discussed about loops. We discussed about basic function types, function statement, and function expression, and also we understood the difference. But how exactly this whole difference is actually properly working in the back end over there, we will understand that in our next class. So till then, have a great time. Please practice a lot. If you have any questions, you can ping me on my LinkedIn as well. You can ping me on my social media accounts as well. So thank you so much for joining this class. Bye everyone. See you in the next class. Bye everyone. Bye.